Let's go, let's go, let's go. Okay, so looks like we are live and kicking, ready to rumble. Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX Worlds. I am delighted to be joined by the Zammo team with us today, Guy, Tonye, and Stacey Kyler. Welcome to VUX World.
Thank you very much.
How's
Yeah,
things?
thank you for having us.
No worries, no worries. Oh, I got a bit of cross talk there on the live broadcast. So how's things then? How's it going, Stacey? We were just saying there that your usual residence is over in Hawaii, which sounds, looking out my window right now, sounds like an absolute dream. But you've managed to fit some travel in to see the fam then.
I have. After a year and a half of not seeing my parents, I am back on the mainland in the heartland, actually. Grew up on a farm, so taking the kiddos around and showing them the cornfields, and good to be home.
Nice, nice. And Guy, you're in the AI capital of the world, seemingly at the moment, Toronto.
Indeed, it did, and it's pretty nice out here, and definitely a lot of interesting things happening. So really happy to be a part of that.
Nice, nice. So thank you for joining us. I'm really appreciative of you spending a bit of time with us, and looking forward to delving into all things Zammo. We'll get into the ins and outs of the platform, I'm sure. We can have a chat about the industry, the lay of the land, some of the insights that you've been picking up and learning from working in the industry. And I'm definitely keen to get on to the topic, which is the title that we've used for this, which is the importance of owning your own NLU, which I am super keen on, because there's a lot of platforms popping up, a lot of players popping up, a lot of different NLU providers, this, that, and the other. So I'd be interested to get your perspectives on the importance of that, and how you recommend people go about doing it as well. But before we kick off, before we get into all of that good stuff, Stacey, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Zammo?
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Stacey Kyler, and I am the head of customer success at Zammo. So I have a really exciting role in that I work closely with Guy, product related, but really bringing in the voice of the customer to our product, and get to spend a lot of time dealing with our customers and helping them to, most of our customers, for the most part, are relatively new to conversational AI. And so getting to kind of help them learn that process, develop really good routines and processes for that, and introducing them to Zammo's cross-platform solution. So that's kind of my role and what I do at Zammo. So I can turn it back over to Guy.
Cool. Guy, tell us a bit about yourself, what you're up to at Zammo.
So I'm leading the engineering at Zammo. So really focusing on try to understand how we could bring the best of breed of technology into a tool that will help bring more great conversational AI applications out there. And it's been really a sweet ride, and a lot of learnings to actually understand how to turn technology into concrete use case application.
Nice, nice. And how would you describe Zammo then to someone who is maybe aware of conversational AI platforms, maybe is aware of the technologies? Let's say that they're familiar with Dialogflow, let's say they're familiar with the bot framework and Lex, or what have you, the Alexa Skills Kit. And then maybe they're familiar with platforms like Cognigy, Speakeasy, Boost, Teneo. How would you describe what Zammo does to those kind of people who have a bit of knowledge and are kind of aware, but maybe haven't used it before?
Stacey, you want to take that one?
Sure. I'll start from the layman's terms, and then if Guy wants to get a little more technical with the audience, he can do that. So the way that Zammo compares to those other platforms that you've just described is that a true cross-platform tool for businesses. So if you think about, every business wants to get on conversational AI, but there's that struggle of, do I start a chatbot? Do I get on Google or Alexa, or do I focus on my IVR solution? And then if you want to do do multiple of those, managing that content across all of those channels. And so Zammo is a SaaS platform that allows you to create conversational AI content and then deploy it simultaneously to all of those different platforms. So you can create Q&A content, you can create multi-turn conversations, you can go deeper and connect to APIs, backend systems, etc. Click a publish button and have that content live on Google, Alexa, a website chatbot, other popular chatbot platforms, as well as IVR. So hopefully that helps to summarize what Zammo does as a solution, Kane.
Cool. We got Jeroen Funk who's saying, great to see you, Kane, and Stacey and Guy also, of course. Nice one, Jeroen. Nice to see you too, mate.
Hello.
If you do have any comments or any questions for the Zammo team, do feel free to stick them in the comments, and we'll do our very best to put them to them. So Guy, would you describe Zammo then as more of the kind of distribution layer that distributes out to those various platforms, or is it also a kind of technology platform in its own right that has its own kind of technology behind the scenes? What's going on kind of under the hood, so to speak?
I would say both. So there's definitely an aspect of distribution. So what Stacey mentioned is one of the big pain point that we've seen, which is getting to a channel can be a process. Some of the people in the audience may be familiar with the challenges of submitting an application for Google or Amazon, or just the idea of bringing up technology so that it's available for an IVR, so interactive voice response. So those are the numbers that you call, and then you can talk to an agent. But one of the key things here is also that it's making available an actual technology where you can create a language model and virtual agents. And I think the key here is not so much the distribution, which is already good. It's the fact that you can have in a single place a virtual agent that can be distributed across the different channels. So having all the capabilities that people may be familiar with, language model, natural language understanding, natural language generation, have that available and have the distribution capabilities, both of them combined in a single place. And what Stacey did not add in her description is the speed. So all of the complexity of each, because you can all imagine every time you submit on one platform, you have to bring in your snippet for your chatbot code, all of these different things. All of that is solved just for you to focus on creating your application and making it available as fast as possible.
Nice. Nice. And so who's the typical user of the platform then? Is it more of a developer? Is it more of a designer? Like who's the ideal person who uses it, Stacey?
We have 3 different categories of customers, I would say, that are most common. One is the business user, right? The owner of the content. And that's what's so great about Zammo is that we put this ability into the hands of the business user that actually has the knowledge to build that content. And so that would be number one. Number 2 is when these businesses want to go deeper, they want to do those API connections, backend system integrations, etc. That's when we see IT departments or developers getting involved in helping with that as well. And then third would be we have a lot of different agencies that work with Zammo, and they are building conversational AI solutions for their customers. So those would be the 3 main categories of folks that are using our platform.
Nice. And out of the well, maybe let's go back behind the scenes again a minute, but out of those kind of channels that you mentioned, you mentioned IVR a couple of times, you've mentioned chat, you mentioned voice assistants. Where are you both seeing, that might be the same, might be different, but I'll put the question to both of you, is like, where are you seeing most of the kind of excitement and activity as far as where these assistants are distributed? Because, I mean, the ideal, it obviously is that people build once and deploy everywhere. I've noticed it in organizations, some people are wanting to start out here, start with chat, start with IVR, start with Alexa. Where are you seeing most of the excitement and activity occurring as far as where people are deploying these assistants? Guy, let's start with you, Guy, and then we'll... Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah. No, please go ahead, Guy.
So it's actually a funny question because we could have multiple answers. There was pre-pandemic and there was post-pandemic.
Right. Well, let's do both. Let's do pre and post then. That sounds good.
Okay, so pre-pandemic, we had two things. The interest and the appetite is for voice. So people want to be on voice. The challenge is they don't always know what to do, and the channels are a little specific. So we get them there fast, you get a skill, an action out there, but then how to drive engagement, how to work around some of the challenges that we may talk about later on around sometimes it doesn't work exactly the way we imagine. And pre-pandemic, interestingly, and Stacey will probably touch a little more on that, a lot of the organization were actually trying to get their feet wet with a chatbot. So chatbot was the big thing. And it was a surprise to us because we thought, chatbot have been around for a while and there's plenty of solutions to get there. But finding some systems that will bring you some of the capabilities that we see today that I mentioned earlier, so the key term, natural language understanding and natural language generation, NLU and NLG, bring that to the chatbot. It wasn't as common as we thought. So that was pre-pandemic. People were trying to get there. Right after the pandemic started, the whole drive went for IVR. And for us, it was a very interesting moment because we always forget about it because we think, IVR, we're used to those system with decision tree where it's press 1, press 2, navigate through the menus. And we didn't realize that they did not get that transformation that was bringing those technology that I was talking about, those virtual agent with those new way of interacting with them. They were not equipped with that. So a lot of organizations started now discovering some of the powerful things that the technology for voice, because it's a voice also. Everybody just sometimes think about voice as just voice assistant, but IVR is a voice and actually a simpler voice because you have more control on the platform. And we'll talk about it when we talk about automated speech recognition and why some things are easier than others. But I would say today, IVR is getting the bigger push because it's a system that people knows, very accessible. And when you plug in natural language understanding, natural language generation, you could actually get some pretty powerful applications and that are available actually pretty easy. So I would say post-pandemic, IVR is the bigger one. Pre-pandemic, chatbot was kind of the big one.
Interesting. Stacey, any other things to add to that, or have you got any different perspectives on either pre, post, the activity that you're seeing?
I have seen a couple of things that I was going to raise on this topic was we definitely have those customers who are just very on the cutting edge, right? Like they want to be innovative and they want to be on voice because they see it as being the next big thing. And those are the customers that are coming to us specifically because of the voice assistance and the ease of doing cross-platform and not having to create a separate skill and a separate action. And the things that those customers are doing are so exciting and really innovative and fun. We can talk about some of those use cases if you're interested in that. But then we also have a lot of like government customers as well. And those customers are saying, look, we really need to cut down on our call center volume because of the pandemic, what he kind of mentioned there. So call centers, as far as IVR and chatbots, they're really wanting to cut down on that call center volume and save their staff. And so they're saying, look, we just need a solution on a chatbot or IVR and we need it fast. And so that is how that piece of the business and the pandemic has really caused that to speed up a lot. So yeah, we're seeing those two different things. We've got the innovative cutting edge businesses who are like all about voice. And then we've got those that there's a major need that they have and they feel like the IVR and chatbot is the solution for that need.
It's interesting you mentioned that earlier on, Guy, when you were saying that, IVR is voice. And that's basically a message that we've been trying to hit home since probably February last year, 2020, when we started really hitting hard in terms of the podcast and in terms of everything that we were doing, really started drilling into the contact center. And there's still a kind of, it almost seems like the more people you speak to in chat, they see similarities with voice, but they don't really identify it as being the same. And the more people you see in voice, when I say voice, I'm talking about voice assistants specifically, they think that voice assistance is voice and then IVR is customer service, is something different. Whereas the reality is all three things, IVR, chat, messaging, if you want to tag that on there as well with chat, voice assistants, for me, they're all one in the same thing. It's natural language, and the only difference is really one's text and one's voice, which most platforms, not all of them, but most of them take the speech and turn it into text anyway. And so it's interesting how you've obviously noticed that kind of similarity. But I wanted to dive into the thing that you mentioned, which I think will probably bring us on to the broad topic that we sort of outlined for this, is that you mentioned that when you're deploying things in IVR systems, you've got more control. So I wonder if you can just elaborate a little bit on that for those who perhaps haven't deployed anything in an IVR. What kind of additional controls or do you have if you're deploying something into a contact center?
So, and it's very interesting because it was a lot of, for us, learning and really working through. I think we all started from the use case, and your point will now make sense to people because you have a use case. If you're just talking in general, like at a high level, people will have a hard time. The contact center became really, for whoever was doing business, the way to get into the doors. So when you go into the contact center, there's a couple of things that you have access to. Depending on where you are putting yourself, because you could put yourself in different places. You could put yourself as the what we call the concierge. So you're receiving calls and potentially dispatching them. Or you could put yourself after the dispatch. So the call is coming from somewhere, and then you come in and bring your agent there. So the advantage, there's trade-off between both. When you are after the dispatcher, you can have some context, like you know who's calling, maybe they have called before, etc., and you have some context that you could use to handle the request. But the main idea and the key thing here when you're bringing your integration is, depending on the system that you use, some of them will allow you to get access to the audio. And this is really a key thing where when you're using or when you're building for voice assistant, you don't realize how much challenges bring the fact that what you just say, it's converting speech into text can bring. And despite everything that you could do good, great conversation design, we have a lot of places where you can learn about those, great system, great NLU, just that potential loss of information or potential mistranscription. So the speech to text not coming in properly can jeopardize your experience. On the voice assistant, you have a limited ways to mitigate that. When you're coming into the contact center, or just in general, you yourself putting together an IVR to which you connect natural language, you can have access and control the transcription and increase things. We'll give one example. We had one of our customers that implemented one of those solutions, and one of those solutions, because they knew their constituents and the people that will access their application, they knew those who were coming and speaking in Spanish. And doesn't mean like it's a great, like it's something specific, but when you're implementing things, if you can tell your system that is transcribing that there is a potential people with Spanish accent, it will help make the transcription better. And just that little, if for those who are a little technical, just specifying that little information in the system that you're using, just make the whole transcription a lot better. And for those who are coming in, and usually just because they have an accent, I have one, you sometimes get some weird response just because the transcription is not fully understanding what you're saying. Just by adding that, you get better results, and overall, you get an application that is a little better. So one of, for me, the key topic is just the availability of the audio, or the ability to help the automated speech recognition just be a little better. And then being able to, we could talk more about it, change the way you have the experience with those agents, where usually you would come and face the press 1, press 2, press 3, press 4. You can have systems where people can navigate just like they would have with intents, etc. But the main key thing for me is getting the right information in so you could process it better.
Yeah. And you end up being able to debug far better as well and improve things over time better. Like with the voice assistants, I mean, Google, you can get a transcript, but as you've already said, if the speech recognition is wrong, the transcript's cocked, and then you're kind of stuck, you know. And Amazon don't really give you anything at all, so you're really in no man's land with Alexa most of the time. And so it's definitely, and also you can choose your speech recognition provider, so you're not stuck with what Amazon give you or what Google give you. You know, you can bring in, a third-party speech recognition provider and actually train that on, your data. And so I definitely agree that the control you have over there is absolutely immense. The other thing that it'd be interesting to get your perspectives on is from a creative point of view. When you create like something for a voice assistant, I think the people kind of understand now how to use voice assistants like Siri and Google Assistant and Alexa, and they've kind of been trained over the years. As much as we would like them to be fully conversational and really humanistic or kind of like natural, the reality is most of the time, and this is just as much to do, I think, with the platforms than it is the people creating stuff. Most of the time they are a little bit kind of rigid, and also people don't necessarily just speak in their own language. They kind of know the right thing to say now. Alexa, play X. And it's like the way that people converse with the voice assistants, I think, is different to how they actually have a conversation. Whereas with the contact center, you call a number, you get put through to something, you hear a bot, but you're not necessarily in Alexa mode necessarily. And so you might ask it questions, you might do other things, you might behave slightly different to it. And so when you're creating in that kind of IVR space, have you noticed a difference in terms of how you create the interaction because of the way that people behave when they engage with that compared to a voice assistant? I'll put that to both of you as if you've both got any kind of experience with that.
I can definitely take that one. So that's an interesting one where for us, it's always, and I think you're doing workshop, you're doing talks, and you must have experienced that when you exchange with people. It's hard to explain to people because at the root of that particular question that you're asking, there's a question of how do end user interact? There are solutions. Obviously, we always recommend that. In the contact center, the good thing that you have is usually you have some history. So the first thing we'll do when you come in, it's like, hey, we have this platform, you can build everything. It's like, great. But before you jump into that, can you take a look at some historical data just to see what exactly people are asking? So don't necessarily drive from what you would want, but maybe from how people are interacting. Because even though you say, I'm picking up the phone, and I have some control, I have some freedom, it's still the way. So the first thing we'll share with you is one insight: the talk to an agent, even with the bot. Trust me, is the first function. The first thing we build is so customer will come in and say, okay, get me an intent so people can jump to the agent. Although we have the all NLU, everything, the API, everything is like, can they skip and get to the agent? So that's one thing where obviously, even though they interact differently and sometimes you can have more natural things, you can definitely bring in some historical data. The challenge with the voice assistant is, unless you go and do proper user testing, but it's costly. Sometimes you have smaller business, they can't necessarily spin up a proper user experience research. One thing we do is we actually, that's the reason why we strongly believe in it has to go fast. We actually get you to the voice assistant as fast as possible. The reason for that is something that we did not mention. We have built-in analytics. The way we solve that and the way we've seen people evolve is not necessarily people coming in and knowing the differences between, okay, I'm building for IVR, I'm building for this. It's more, let me get something and use the analytics to inform. Because a lot of people will have preconceived ideas unless they run testing, but that's not as frequent. And we can have those, high level conversation. No, but I'm telling you, users actually, they don't really drive intent. They really try to get the command. So, but no, commands are not a good thing. I would want conversation repair, all of this technicality. What we say is, look, get some things out there, start to get some queries in, and use the analytics to inform and get that historical data that you may not have, and just improve quickly over time. So really the feedback to, I imagine something, I do some role play, I imagine my conversation, somebody comes in, try to skip through or try to do something else. Okay, cool. I may miss that user, but let me quickly improve my skill, rebuild my model, and make it available. And that's for us kind of the key of the things that we've been seeing. It's less, there is a standard way just because of the variety in the industry. Like you'll have government call center are different from retail call center. So there's no, for me, holistic way to do things. What we said is we can try something, but the better, or the things we are looking for people to do, is quickly learn and iterate. That user research that you did not do, use the production data to understand and improve over time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting now because have you found, so this might be one for you, Stacey, given that you work kind of closely with the customers, like that description you give there, Guy, is very much kind of, if you take a typical project, we always say that the go live is in the middle of the project, basically, because you need to do something to work out what needs to be done. That might be listening to calls, it might be profiling the use cases, all that kind of stuff, finding a nice high volume but not overly complex place to start. So you've got an initial bit of stuff to do before you go live with something. But typically in a typical project, like a website build or something, the go live is kind of the end. So it's like, let's do all of our time, let's put all our time and effort in, and then let's go live with it. Whereas with this, it's very much like going live is just part of it. It's not the end. And so all of that data that you start learning from, whether that's your conversational patterns, whether that's your training data that keeps getting fed through, that's when you really start learning. So Stacey, when you're kind of onboarding customers, when you're working with customers, have you noticed any, what should we say, cultural, in terms of like business cultural obstacles when you come to this methodology, if people are used to that waterfall go live at the end? Like how do your clients typically take this methodology of let's just get something out there, then let's learn and refine? What's their usual kind of appetite for that kind of thing?
I think I would have to go back to what I said earlier, where we've got those different pockets of customers. We've got the ones that are, really innovative and wanting to do super cool things. And to be honest with you, those are the ones that are harder to convince to go live earlier, because they want to create this really cool thing and they want to make it perfect before launching it. So those customers are a little bit harder to convince to go live faster. The ones that I described where they have a use case and they need a solution and they need it right now, those, they're ready. They're like, yes, we've got 5 FAQ pages on our website. We want to auto ingest those. We want to get those live on a chatbot, IVR, voice assistants, and then we're just going to continuously improve as we go. We have one major enterprise on the West Coast that did that. They launched in like 3 days using content that they already had written, and they started in like the first week. They had their chatbots at a success rate of like 85%. Today, if you go to that chatbot and you ask questions, there's over a 92% chance that whatever question you ask, you're going to get the correct answer, because they've used that feedback loop on a daily basis. They look at those analytics, they see those not understood messages, and then they add either question variants or new content to their knowledge base. So it really does depend. But those, like I said, the ones that have the immediate need, they're happy to jump on board with that, launching live sooner rather than later.
Interesting.
And I want to add a little bit to that because that comes from somewhere, because we chatted with them. And one of the things is, for a lot of those organizations, they've been used to trying out those projects, but because of the time it took to get to a launch, they would think the way you have imagined. Like, they would sometimes not do it just because they know, okay, if I have to go and get these approval, I rather not do it. And that's what we actually found, where we had people willing to go, but because of the path to get approval, resources, etc., they actually ended up not doing it. So when we came in and like, hey, we solved all of this, there's little to provision, and you just do your thing and press this button, it's up and live. They just had the argument to make the case internally as to why proceed. Because one of the challenges, if you were to ask people, they won't always. So today it's a little better. There's a few more platforms that can help, but it still takes time. Where if you just come and say, hey, you focus on the content. Once you have it, you press here. There's no need to sign up, etc. There's no approval needed from anyone. Then you get them to adopt that mindset. And the second thing that is important, what Stacey said, is if you come and talk to people about the feedback loop of machine learning, they'll be lost. It's like, hey, precision, recall, etc. If you talk to them very concretely, here's your analytics, here's your not understood or no match, and again, the terminology in the industry, however you want to call that, but here's the sentence. So you're seeing the sentence, and you just have to add that here. When you teach them that, then they become empowered and they now start trusting, especially the scores that Stacey gave are available to them. So you see, like I'm at 85, and over the week, I see like a little graph showing that I've improved. And if you are able to materialize things like that and explain it in the way that Stacey was able to picture, it's actually not so much a challenge, because people don't choose necessarily waterfall out of, oh, I have agile or I have feedback loop and I choose waterfall. It's something that they are used to and how other projects were conducted. And then that's the mindset that they have. But if you expose other things, but that still relate to the things that they are actually trying to do, that process is not as difficult as we would sometimes think. That was a surprise to us to see. Once you solve those problems for them, and they just have to focus on one thing, making the case for you, for your tool, or just for conversational AI in general, has become a little smoother to progress with.
Yeah, you're right. It's very cultural, isn't it? I think people don't think about the best way to approach a project most of the time. It's just they're on a hamster wheel of doing it. So waterfall just becomes the kind of go-to cultural thing, doesn't it? We mentioned around when you deploy in certain environments, you have more control over speech recognition, getting audio files, listening to them to figure out what might have went wrong, retraining ASR potentially to clean it up, depending on your kind of use case or what have you. We haven't really spoke that much about the NLU, so I'm wondering whether you can just share either an example or reasons why having a degree of control and ownership over the NLU side of things is important for clients and businesses wanting to start deploying these kind of assistants.
Yes, I can talk about that. So it's very interesting because the first thing is like when we say ownership, because owner has multiple meaning, there's levels of ownership. And I'll go with a scale of you code your own NLU all the way to, let's say, for example, the voice assistant, which will be the one that you have probably less control over. So the key thing that people, I think, don't usually have conversation about, and I'm always surprised because when we talk about a no match, I'm not sure why, a lot of the time, people will think that the no match is coming from an NLU that is binary. It's either it found it or it didn't find it. And if you didn't find it, then you have to, work your way through things. The reality is the NLU is a little more nuanced than that. When there is a no match, it's not like it didn't find anything. It's this concept that is really key and that will answer your original question, which is the confidence score. So effectively, whenever you're making a request, that request gets the confidence score of how much the machine learning that you've built is sure that this particular intent, this particular entities is the right for that particular incoming query. And that's really, really important, because when there is a no match are not just 100%. If you look into details, but if you have access to those, and that's where owning part of the NLU is important. If you have access to those, you will see that if you look at everything that was considered, some of the intents that might be the good answer were actually just with a low confidence score. And one of the one of the challenges that we've seen is, if you just solve problems by just adding the utterance, you expose yourself to something that is hard to conceptualize, but sometimes you could deter your language model by just adding an utterance. And it doesn't show when you have 5 to 10 utterance, but when you become a bigger organization with more intent, or if your intent have plenty of utterances, there's this concept that you only see a little bit at scale, which is the balance of utterance between intent. And the key things of owning the NLU is mostly when you try to understand, because sometimes people are just, yeah, this chatbot doesn't work, or this thing doesn't work, but why does it not work? And usually people will just jump into, oh, it's because it's missing data, or because the conversation is not correct. That might be true, but the first steps into knowing that's the reason is to know exactly how the machine resolved your particular query coming in. So really, there's two things for people that would like to kind of, unless we talk about it further. The first one is, what is the confidence score? Like, why did it decide to not proceed with an intent? And the second thing is, what were the other considered intent? And those two information are actually available in any natural language understanding platform that you own. If you take anyone, so the ones that you program, Lex, Dialogflow itself, Lewis, Watson, NLU, they give you that information. The challenge with the voice assistant, which are embedding part of those capabilities, is they don't give you that information. And that's very hard, because when something goes wrong, the ASR is a problem, but how it queried the language model is another layer of problem. And when you don't own that particular piece, you find yourself at, how am I trying to fix that? And then you start thinking, oh, I need to add that, I need to change my model, I need to change my conversation. But in reality, when you do that, you might actually make things worse, just because you don't know that the problem is coming from there. So for me, the main thing, or the main reason why I would suggest to people to try as best as they can to have some ownership is not so much to be able to control, it's mostly to have the visibility on those two things that I mentioned. What were the scores? Like, how did the machine proceed this? And what were the other considerations? So out of the machine made a choice, what were the other options that it had, so that I understand, and I try to understand why it picked one over the other.
Interesting. So in that situation, then, let's say that you're looking at, let's say, because I'm assuming you kind of alluded to it earlier on, Stacey, that you have business users, and I think Guy, you spoke about it as well. Like, if you explain to people, this bit here, sentence, wasn't understood for X reason, and what you need to do is then populate it into here and train it. That's a really simple way of explaining to somebody how to keep training the model. But when you start getting into things like confidence scores, how do you kind of, to someone who knows nothing about it, how do you explain how to interpret those two things, confidence score and the other considerations? Is that something that you would do? Is that something that the end user would do? And how do you get them, as someone who knows nothing about it, how do you get them to then remedy that situation?
The funny thing is, they do. It's funny because It's not even us. What happens is, they will ask you, because they see the analytics. So they see the query coming in and they see the response. So, and I think we got one today, Stacey. why did this response come up?
Right.
So they send the email. Why did this
Yes.
response come up?
So yeah, they asked a question and they got an answer. It just wasn't the correct answer. So they were trying to figure out why.
What,
And
the end user asked why, or the customer using using your platform?
no, the customer using the
Zammo's
platform.
customer.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. So
The
they sent you
customer
an
using
email
the
saying, "Why has this happened?"
Yeah, because they check the analytics, and because we did add this, add this, add this. That works when it's like a no match, and we don't get into the technical detail.
Mhm.
But the second piece, the reason why that topic will come up is when you see the request that came in and it just went to another intent. And that just lays the foundation for us to have the conversation, because we will take that, look at the transcript, and then here's what's under the hood. And then they'll say, oh, okay. So I know this came in because it's, let's say, 60%. And that leads us to the first thing we tell them, which is every system that you use have an inner threshold of what is picked and what is not. If you own your NLU, you choose the threshold, which is what we highly suggest and allow people for us to do. If you don't, that threshold is chosen for you. But best of luck as to, is it 80, is it 75, is it 60, is it 90? Is it too sensitive or is it not enough sensitive? And how do you deal with that? Especially because for some of our customers, it's not the same across all questions. So it's not like I want 75 for everyone. There are sensitive topics, so things that maybe require some, have some criticality in it, like life-threatening or things like that. They would want the thing to be like not like, they rather just accept something critical than miss something critical, and vice versa. There are things where it's not as critical, or if anything, just redirect to an agent. In case you're not sure, at least we'll get to an agent in place and talk through it. And that's how we bring that topic up. So I explained to you because you're a little more familiar with the NLU itself. But from our customer perspective, less than the NLU, it's more because of the analytics, they're seeing those challenges. Because the difficulty is, if I have to explain to you at a high level, precision and recall in machine learning, that's difficult unless you are a technical person. But when you look at your analytics and you tell me, no, this one I would prefer, if it's not sure, I prefer that it goes to an agent, or this one, it's okay if it doesn't respond, let me change this so I can have a tentative upsell or conversation repair. Being able to articulate that comes from the analytics. But just at a high level for people to enable that, I would highly recommend to anyone, it's important for you to have access to that information so you could do that work versus facing challenges and having to guess which one is impacting. Because again, some challenges only occur on the channel itself. So for example, if you're using Amazon, if I'm using my Echo Dot and I'm using the new Echo Show, you have no guarantee that the two will behave the same for the same person talking. It's hard for you to control that. So you want to at least control, okay, let's say anything can happen, but at least if I get the right text, I am sure, or at least I know what happens to it. I would always encourage people, do your best you can, but try to control that.
Interesting.
Kane, we have a customer right now that we're working with that has, and yes, you're gonna question my number here, but they have 36,000 topics in their knowledge base.
Wow.
And you can only imagine how nuanced those questions are and how similar some of those are. So for a customer like that, having that ability to control that percentage, like Guy was just describing there, just makes such a difference in the success rate of that bot that they are building.
Absolutely. I'm impressed how you've managed to devolve a lot of that stuff to the customer, because a lot of this stuff is, excuse me, a lot of the platforms, even if the platform itself gets that data, a lot of them, I'm talking about the drag and drop sort of toolings and that, not the NLU providers themselves, but a lot of the platforms tend to have analytics. Here's what was missed, but there's only a few I've seen that have things like confidence scores. And a lot of them are managed services as well. And so the ability to have that level of detail and to explain how to use it and to then give control over it to the end user, I think is a bit of a unique approach.
And for us, more than that, it's important for the user, because the only one who can solve that is technically actually the customer building. Because I mentioned that it comes from, because if I have to decide, I want this question to go to an agent, it's hard for you as a provider, as a platform, despite your greatest data scientist and everything, to know the business. And I think you sometimes, I think you talked about it a lot of time, which is the conversation goals and what we are really trying to build and how, we could use the conversation to serve that. But the key thing here is, at the end, the one building the application, they know where they're trying to bring their users. And if we were to solve that, we would make assumption, but we don't know. And again, the challenge or the beauty of working with multiple industry, so government, and that's, I think for me, everyone should work with government because you learn a lot, and retail are completely different. Where government, where the constituents go, or the information the constituent get, is critical. They would make that thing the threshold. I think if they could put a 99%, they're rather just, no, call us if they're in doubt, than risk saying the wrong thing that could jeopardize the relationship. Versus in retail, they're okay sometimes with the conversation failing, so they could potentially try to repair. So they are okay with, I can get you the wrong things, because they assume, and it's sometimes true, customers could be forgiving, because people sometimes will, and that's true, would think people are coming to the chatbot with lower expectation. So they could be okay with the, don't put that too low. I rather anything just get a response, where the government would be, no, if there is any doubt, give my customer service line and get my people to talk to an agent if there's any doubt. And you can't make that decision holistically. There is no good answer, just people have to choose. That's the reason why, for us, the focus outside of the capability, because it's a problem to solve, was get that info to the customer and trust them into making the choice that works for them so that their application meets their goal. And that's the key. And that's the reason why I think solving that holistically in a managed way is probably a very tough challenge, versus the one that is building, if you equip them, they can actually do really great things.
A couple of other things with government is that people don't have a choice if they have to contact the government, and basically the government's got all the power. They can go to another shop, but they can't go to another government. And so it's very interesting. I've had a lot of experience working with government in this, and also in general digital service design, and it is a different ball game, It's and the cultures of government are all the same all over the world, very risk averse, so you need to be fucking accurate. But yes. But so we've mentioned a couple of different NLU providers and all that kind of stuff. with Zammo, if you onboard a customer, is it a proprietary NLU? Do you have an open door to all providers? Are you working with a particular provider? Like, how does all that kind of side of things work?
So we work with Lewis. It's not a bring your own NLU provider, which would be a BYO NLU.
BYO NLU, yeah. That's not a bad term.
No. So we are using Lewis, and we definitely we let customer, so it's not like a secret or anything. We let customer know about it. We kind of scope the different systems that were available. Louis brought a lot of things for us. We recommend that, and some people may just say, okay, I'm just going to use Louis myself. And we encourage people to do so. Our platform brings a little more, but when it comes to NLU, a lot of things that we've seen, again, from customer use cases, the support for languages, so the amount of languages. And one key things, it might be a little technical, but the way you deal with languages is some NLU, not all, allow you to build language model in a particular locale. So for example, I can say, all right, I will make a language model which will resolve things in, for example, French Canada. And Lewis is one of those who offers you the ability to say, this language model is in French Canada. Some other system actually use a translation. And because of that, the performance is not as great. Where if you have a system that allows you, and there are others out there, but Lewis is the one that for us performed it better, allow you to create in those languages. So languages was a big one. And also just the tooling to be able to do a lot of the things that we've mentioned, getting access to confidence core, improving and allowing people to tailor, because when you have to do that routing, giving more importance to certain intents or to certain questions, or even just how do you manage entities, Lewis offers a lot of things. And if you build properly around it, you can actually get a powerful natural language understanding system. So for us, we get, and also just to mention government, they have a lot of those certification that you need to be able to proceed on a lot of projects. So compliance is another thing. Lewis has, if you look at the page for the compliance, it's aggressive and small fonts, but you have all of that out of the box. So when people are coming in, they know it's Lewis in the back for us. And we don't allow people to bring their own natural language, but we do ingest from other people just to bring that back into Lewis. We have solutions for that as well.
Interesting. It's I absolutely do love Microsoft's tooling. I think with enterprises as well, everyone's using Microsoft to some degree, so it's a lot easier to get it through the door as well.
Correct.
But it's interesting because like the way that I've been thinking about like all of this tooling over the last few kind of, I suppose, months or year is that on an NLU side, and maybe to some degree on the speech recognition side, although the speech recognition side I think is slightly different because some providers have really honed in to try and nail Spanish. Some have really honed in to try and nail French, and so it's like ASR at the moment there is still a difference. There'll be a notable difference depending on what you're trying to do in which locale, depending on what provider you should go for. NLU over time it might homogenize, but there's a load of work to be done with gender and race and all this kind of stuff needs fixing. So yeah. I think we're miles away from speech recognition providers being kind of like all the same as far as their capabilities. NLU it's maybe slightly maybe a different story. I'd be just interested in getting your both potentially your perspectives around the NLU providers. Maybe include Raza in that as well, and others and other systems that have proprietary NLUs. Do you think that it is or will be kind of commoditized, or do you think that there will be kind of like an ultimate platform that everyone gravitates to? Microsoft is getting a lot of traction. A lot of people are going towards Microsoft. Like, how do you see that side of things playing out in future? Do you think they'll all be commoditized and very similar? Do you think there'll be a one winner, lots more players? Like, how would you describe the future of NLU provision, would you say?
I think they all converge. And again, I don't have a crystal ball, so it's just me not speaking on their behalf. I think they will converge with a few players because it will depend. So if you need out of the box use case, so you've seen Google has announced Lambda, Microsoft is teaming up with OpenAI, etc. So there's out of the box, we are trained on English literature and hopefully bring more and more. And you have those generative models. So pre-trained systems will get better. So tomorrow, and you already have that when you work with 1P capabilities, like videos, audio, etc. Tomorrow, if you need something that is common, I don't know, cooking or playing music, etc. There will be a few, but they'll all be kind of the same because they'll be trained to a certain extent. When you go into specifics, and that's the thing where you'll have what was before nuance, where nuance had really specific domains. Like you couldn't just pick up a dragon, like you had a dragon for medical, you have a dragon for car, etc. Like you had like specific domain where you have pre-trained and capabilities. Like if you take a nuance device, your ASR for, I don't know, like the medical stuff was pretty good, although it's pretty challenging the way people pronounce things, etc. So I'd see that there will be a few, and probably the bigger platform, just converging and owning the, let's say, the general use case and offering little nuances here and there based on how much data set each have. And then you'll still have a whole bunch of smaller player, very specialized, meaning my NLU will work for this particular use case, but will not perform well for cooking, but it will be very good for, I don't know, government driving license renewal. It will be very good for that, really powerful for that, but not for the rest. And I think it will still be like a lot of smaller player, very specialized, and the bigger platform, which have computing power, bigger data set, etc., owning the, I would call that the general like everyday use case, like turn on my blinder, the commands, all the things that I do, order my food, etc., book my whatever, like bookings, etc. But for the specific niche domain, then you'll have players that will be like what was nuance back then, which are less familiar for the general public, but for professionals, they'll go to those, and you have a lot of those smaller startups that focuses on this one use case with this one set of users. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Domain specific. Wicked. So we'll wrap up with one final question, Stacey. If you were if there's people listening to this who are either looking to switch platforms, interested in experimenting, or even people who haven't got up and running with anything yet, looking to get started, what's your kind of advice or top tips, apart from obviously calling Zammo? What's your kind of top tips for brands, whether it's government, retailers, whoever it might be, starting out on their conversational journey? What's your kind of top tips?
I would say first would be start with FAQ content. Start with Q&A. That is kind of the foundation of your conversational AI presence. It's the questions that the businesses that we work with, it's their customers, the questions that they're already asking. And so it gives you a place to start. And then you've got that ability to look at those analytics and see what other questions are being asked. So you can build then multi-turn conversations to answer, routine workflows or et cetera, to things that are, constantly being called into your call center. But by starting with FAQ content, getting that out there, and then letting your customers drive where you go with your conversational AI, I think you're going to see a lot greater success versus just saying, here's what we're going to do, and then hoping that it works. I think letting the customers drive what your conversational AI solution looks like, I think is a lot more successful. The other thing is really working on, and I know, Kane, this is something that it's near and dear to your heart. I hear you talk about it a lot, which is that conversation design. And that's something that not a lot of people are aware of. And so that's an education tool that we work with. Part of our customer success program is training our customers on how to do that conversation design and, conversation repair and all of the things where we see those sort of conversations failing. So those would be my top two, is being okay with starting small, if you will, even though FAQ content is not small, but starting there and then building your way up and not being afraid to start at that point and then build from there. Hopefully that answers your question.
Definitely. Guy, anything to add? Any top tips for people starting out?
Hey, don't be afraid to own NLU. Yeah, that would be my thing where it's, especially, I hope we have people that are not as familiar with the domain. It is not as complicated, so don't be afraid. And second thing is, failure is not my chatbot doesn't work. Failure is my chatbot doesn't work, and I'm not trying to find out why. And for me, that would be the key thing. So what Stacey said, start small, and there are solutions. So for people that are scared, you have ways to just get 5% of your IVR traffic coming in, 5% of your people on the website seeing the chatbot. Like, it doesn't have to be displayed to everyone. So there's a way to start small, not just like, hey, I'm going out there and my reputation, etc. Don't be afraid. There are ways, but just go out there. Go out there and see. Sometimes you'll just look at the analytics and there's 0 queries to your chatbot. So you just save yourself a whole bunch of time trying to do conversation design. And second, don't be afraid. It's okay to learn. There are systems out there, and if you find people, it doesn't necessarily have to be us, but some people can break it down from what's happening to how you can solve that. And that journey is not as bad, doesn't take as much time, and bring powerful results. And we could share many of those of our enlightenment from customers just with smaller pieces. Just the fact that you get people to engage with you. I think don't forget the end goal, and don't be afraid of the journey. It's a good journey to be in, and tooling and equipment is better. And definitely go ahead and try. That would be my guidance.
Nice. I like it. Well, I have absolutely loved this conversation. It's been absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate you both joining us. Stacey, where can people go to learn a bit more about Zammo? I can hear them beating the door down now, typing away, trying to reach out. Where can people go to learn a bit more?
So our website is simply zammo.ai. And if they want to reach out for a demo, there's a link on that website, or there's also hello@zammo.ai, and we will get you in touch with someone who can schedule that live demo and build a custom demo in a day for you. So happy to do that so that you can share that with your other stakeholders at your organization.
Nice. Appreciate it. We will put that link, as well as many other links, your social profiles, all that kind of stuff, we'll stick in the show notes. Any other final thoughts, parting words that you've got for the VUX World audience?
Stacey?
I was just going to say, I'm sure Guy has so much wisdom. I'm sure he has something that he's dying to share.
Well, I have, yes, it is true. And I have just a little message. So outside of all these things, I always want to call out whenever I get an opportunity. Conversational AI is a good way to have and help with another topic that is dear to us, which is accessibility. So just don't forget, when you're building, coming up and making voice only or making chat only, don't forget, we don't all access the services the same way. So I mentioned that earlier, like I was kind of making fun of the menu into the IVR, but a pro tips, keep that menu. There's a few people that, because of their accents, because of speech impairments, are not able to actually communicate back. So they would appreciate that press 1 or press 2 to navigate. Vice versa for your bot. I see we've seen a lot of chatbot. Don't forget, if a screen readers come on here and you put a whole bunch of emojis or images, that is not great. So be mindful of those. So out of all that topic, NLU, all those great things, making conversational apps, please make them accessible. That would be my final thoughts. Hopefully reach some people in your community.
Definitely, I definitely concur with that. That is fantastic advice. Thank you very much. Appreciate you both joining us. Really, really do. That was an immense conversation. Next week we're talking to Davide Petramala of Avaya. So we'll actually probably continue some similar conversations to what we've been having in terms of voice enabling IVRs. So we're going to be talking about what Avaya have got, what Avaya are up to, and what kind of insights they're seeing in the marketplace. So looking forward to that. Please do join us next week. Guy, Stacey, this has been absolutely immense. Thank you so much. And we look forward to speaking to you again, hopefully soon.
Awesome.
Thank you.